number 39 into the Rumble. 39 men. And the leader of Titus Worldwide, Titus O'Neil.
Titus had a very busy week here in Saudi Arabia. He's had dinner with many princes and very important people. And he just...
Oh my God, what the heck? What did Titus just... I can't believe what I just saw. Did that really happen?
Oh my God!
Oh my God, did that happen?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Yeah.
Titus O'Neil trying to slide into the ring.
Let's just move on and forget about it.
I can't believe this.
Poor Titus O'Neil. It's a good thing he has a sense of humor about this, but yeah, he's become a internet legend by this one botch alone from the greatest Royal Rumble last Friday in Saudi Arabia. And I guess, yeah, I mean, obviously he's okay. And he joked about it. And I was going to mention this later, but why not here now? He got his wish, meaning that he tweeted about it the next morning about making T-shirts and make some money off of it. And you know what? He got his wish as WWE Shop is now selling T-shirts based on Titus' trip. And in the front of it, it's Rumble, Stumble, or Slide. And the back of it says, Do It Worldwide. So there you go. Kudos to Titus O'Neil and WWE Shop for working on this like ASAP. But once again, glad he's okay. And everyone got a little kick out of it. And of course, like me at the beginning, had to share my thoughts and feelings about it because, let's be realistic, it was either that or maybe do a little Shop of Horrors theme where the ring is Audrey and he just ate him up with his feet and shoes sticking out. But, oh my goodness. Titus, you are one of a kind. And that's not a negative at Rob Van Dam, but he's a different one of a kind. Titus for sure has lit the internet on fire, and definitely the newest, or at least definitely the most recent, greatest botch of all time. And there's one meme, obviously I can't show it or play audio of it because it's a picture, and for many years now, the original greatest botch was Shockmaster, making his debut in WCW. For those who don't know, he was trying to make this grand entrance on Ric Flair's talk show at the time on WCW. What was it called? The Flair for the Gold or something along those lines. Can't remember. But how can you remember the name of the show when the show stealer was Shockmaster, a.k.a. Typhoon, a.k.a. Tugboat, who's trying to basically break through this thin wall, and right before that happened, pyro would go off, similar to Kane's pyro at the top entrance at the ramp. So what happened was the pyro goes off, he breaks through, but trips over a board that either he wasn't told of or couldn't see because he was wearing a bedazzled version of a Stormtrooper helmet, and he trips. Instead of breaking through the wall, he tripped over, landing head first. The helmet goes flying. He tries to conceal his identity, but sure, he still had his long hair back then, and covered up his face and just crawled around looking for the helmet, puts it back on, and tries to speak in his most rashy voice he could, and just played it on like as if nothing happened, even though you hear Flair on microphone and maybe Sting. This wasn't show. You can hear the audio, but you couldn't see the laughing between the guys. It was Sting, Arn Anderson, British Bulldog, and Ric Flair all on stage. I think Harlem Heat was there too. I can't remember the entire clip, but that's what happened. Point being is I can't show the picture of this fan. I didn't catch his name, but apparently he drew out an illustration of the torch literally being passed on from Shockmaster to Titus O'Neil as the new greatest botch in pro wrestling history. Yeah, it's definitely not something, especially if you're a newcomer, you want to get into the business. That's not a goal to shoot for. I mean, try to win as many different championships as you can. I think it's redundant at this point to have it 16 or more times, but that's just me. That's just not realistic. But, it is what it is. And once again, glad to know that Titus O'Neil has a sense of humor about this, and we can try to move on without looking back and just laughing our heads off. Just have a couple of notes of the greatest Royal Rumble, but before I get into that, thank you for joining me. This is GoodOlJM, episode 6 of the JM Report, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And it's been quite an interesting week, to say the least. Again, I'm going to touch on some notes of the aftermath of the greatest Royal Rumble that took place last Friday in Saudi Arabia. And they were not all good. And by the way, if you're curious to know my thoughts of the greatest Royal Rumble, I did put up an extra episode of the JM Report the day after. So that would be episode 5. I did it from the comfort of my own home, thinking that had I done it here and now, a week later, and considering all the botches throughout the evening that took place and the matches themselves and what it really meant overall, I mean, it was just, and I mentioned it there, and a lot of people seem to agree with me that it was just a glorified house show, an overpriced, overstacked, glorified house show. But it is what it is, and that's what the arrangements between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and WWE came to. They wanted this big, they being Saudi Arabia, this big epic show to take place in the stadium of Jeddah and just go all out. And go all out they did, because when was the last time they really did any pyros, even for their own shows? Yeah, they have WrestleMania and all, but that's once a year now since their budget cuts. And here we are, it's been a couple of years now since we've seen any pyro. And, you kind of miss it after a while, but I get it too, not so much because of budget cuts, but after a while, it does get repetitive, and not everyone needs pyros or those pops, those loud pops, as some call concussions, the actual firework, not the condition, and the flames, the pyro, the sparklers, the fireworks in the sky, stuff like that. It's a nice visual. It does add more to the entrance of depending on the superstar. Say someone like a Kane or someone like a Shawn Michaels when he was still in the game, he'll have the fireworks. Kurt Angle, he'll have it. Randy Orton, remember it would rain pyro. That was a cool visual. Even Triple H, every year he'll put a lot of thought into his entrances for WrestleMania, and if it involves pyro, you more or less gonna expect a great show out of that. The entrance alone before the match even starts. So again, a couple of notes here from the greatest Royal Rumble, and Daniel Bryan is now the new longest running participant in any Royal Rumble in history, just destroying the previous record set by Rey Mysterio at 1 hour and 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Daniel Bryan went coast to coast, or from start to finish, or from east to west, or whatever the phrase is. But Daniel Bryan, who drew number 1 at the greatest Royal Rumble, lasted 1 hour and 16 minutes and 5 seconds. He was just a wreck at the end. He wasn't broken down or anything, but just the bruises and cuts and the palm strikes from Roderick Strong, from all those chops that he delivered to Daniel Bryan. He beat him. His chest was beaten red. It all but broke Daniel's skin, and could have had some cuts bleeding. Yeah, but that didn't happen, thankfully. I guess he pulled back just enough, but not enough to still see his palm prints a few days later. And later on, WWE.com would post an article revealing a little bit more information about I'm trying not to botch his name, Hiroki Sumi. That was the sumo wrestler that came in. He was eliminated quickly by Mark Henry. And little bit of background on this man. He's a former 500-pound professional sumo wrestler, and has competed for, Hiyosho Fuji for more than a decade. The article also hinted that Sumi's potential reemergence in WWE, meaning there's a possibility that he might return. No further details at this moment, at least not from this recording. But What Culture, if anyone follows them on YouTube, they put out a report earlier in the week, I should say, and during the negotiations and business talks between Saudi Arabia and, okay, to be more specific, I know it's not the entire country, it's not the entire population. I don't want to be misinformed or misled here. The Sports Authority of Saudi Arabia, and some even saying the Prince of Saudi Arabia, like the royal family, also had some input on this. But apparently, according to What Culture, those who were basically begging for the show to happen on the Saudi Arabia side had a list of wrestlers they would wish to see participate and appear at the Greatest Royal Rumble. 2 names came up that were, I would assume, all but awkward to explain why they could not appear. One being the Ultimate Warrior, and the other being Yokozuna. I do not know the status currently if the WWE Network has any influence out there. I would assume that they do, because at least for us, that's how we could have watched it. If not, I'm sure they would have had a local cable channel broadcast for the Saudi Arabian people. Again, I'm not sure. I did not look into that. But again, according to What Culture, this is what some of the people putting the show together from the Saudi Arabian side were asking for these guys to show up. Unfortunately, they could not have, because they are no longer with us. And that Hiroki Sumi was a substitute for Yokozuna. How and when, why they scouted out, they being WWE, to find the closest resembling individual for Yokozuna is beyond me. But, you want to make your clients happy, I guess. Obviously, there wasn't no substitute for the Ultimate Warrior. That probably would not have sat well with the family, I'm just assuming. But it definitely would not have been in good taste, that's for sure. So hopefully someone has smartened up the fans of Saudi Arabia and explain why certain individuals cannot be there, much less participate in the 50-man Royal Rumble. Batista made the news this week. He made he didn't make it, wasn't him, but he was interviewed by Tampa Fox 13 and expressed interest in returning to wrestling. And he has a couple of quotes here. "I've been offered a spot in the Hall of Fame, and I've turned it down. And not because I don't want to be a member of the Hall of Fame. It's just because I don't feel like there's closure in my career." And that's quite true in a huge way. And I completely agree, despite the man is pushing 50, but, by looking at him, you can't even tell. He looks great. He's in great shape. He's part of the biggest moving opening weekend of all time, that being the Avengers Infinity War. So I'm sure he's out there and basking in the glory as he deserves to. Him and the rest of the cast, crew, directors, producers, everyone behind the scenes, and just waiting for the next big break after Marvel. You can expect Batista not to do this forever, as I'm sure other opportunities will open up because of this. And similar to how he got his spot in the Blade Runner sequel, the James Bond, I think it was Spectre. He didn't have a line of dialogue, maybe like 1 or 2 words, but his presence alone, standing next to Daniel Craig, was a formidable adversary. He was just a big man in that movie. And of course, there are other projects that he's done previously, and he's looking forward to more. I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I got sidetracked trying to look for more information as to him being in talks with WWE, and also with this interview, being sidetracked from trying to find out more information of what he's up to now. But he confirmed that WWE did reach out to him for a possible return at this year's WrestleMania, and to be Ronda Rousey's tag team partner for the mixed tag against Triple H and Stephanie. And he thought it was a good idea, him being Dave, and was, up for it. He didn't have too many demands. He's not that. He's not that kind of person that's on an ego trip, that he knows he's worth a lot and he would want this and that and wants an extra stretch limo to pick him up from the airport. No, it's all he asked for really was one thing. to kick off his return, and obviously when he needed to step aside to promote any upcoming projects, and that would include the Avengers Infinity War movie. But in return, all he asked for was a storyline and one match that would lead into WrestleMania 35 at MetLife Stadium for a match against Triple H. One can only assume that could have been his swan song, Batista's. He's been asking for this program for such a long time, even when he was around in 2014, I believe, his last run. And speaking of that, even then, he was very open about his failed 2014 run leading into WrestleMania 30, and that he would ask for possible dates to be away from WWE to help promote the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And basically Batista said that when he mentioned that to Triple H, Stephanie, and Vince, that they smirked at him and didn't really think the movie was going to be that successful. Oh, you don't know how good it's going to be and this and that. Granted, the movie itself was a gamble. In the beginning stages of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Guardians of the Galaxy was not part of the MCU just yet. It was such a huge gamble, and not to get too off track here, but Marvel and Disney had those movie rights to those characters, so they figured, why not? Bigger is better, or more is greater, or whatever. And they put out the casting call, and Batista auditioned for Drax. He got it, thankfully, and he's a great actor in those movies, both Guardians of the Galaxy and most recently Infinity War. And here's my thing, and I'm kind of a movie buff myself. Obviously, I don't talk much about it here. I do have separate movie reviews when I'm able to put them out on a JM Report. But here's my thing, and they really got to be somewhat out of touch, if not completely out of touch. They being Vince, Stephanie. Well, we all know Vince is, but Triple H and Stephanie caught me by surprise that they don't keep track of what's going on beyond the universe of the WWE, and not know or been told about. There's a series of movies going on based on comic book characters. It's called the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And all the movies up until Guardians of the Galaxy at that time, they've broke box office records, Of course, not as big as recently as Infinity War, something like $800 million opening weekend. That's just insane. But point being, all those movies were very, very successful. Commercially, with the fans, with Rotten Tomatoes, the critics, you name it, they've all enjoyed them. Some are better than others, but you can't take away the fact that previous movies were successful, and as much of a gamble as the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was, and finding out that it paid off in the long run, you still smirked at the man, and all he asked for was a little bit of time off to promote the movie. Chances are he had to go worldwide and attend all the premieres and this and that. I mean, this coming from Triple H in particular, this coming from his movies that's gone straight to DVD and Blu-ray. But yet he had the nerve to smirk at Batista, allegedly. Yeah, good choice there. Good job there. But that was a part of a huge, no, it wasn't a fallout, but definitely a disagreement, and why Batista had to leave shortly after WrestleMania 30. He had to return to his commitments in Hollywood, so to speak. And at the time, he did sign a full-time contract. He would attend the live events on television, pay-per-views, including live events, non-televised, all that stuff. But I guess that left a sour taste in his mouth. And, I don't blame the man. I wouldn't do business with someone that does not have faith in me outside the business, because either you couldn't do it yourself and wasn't successful, but you still have the nerve to poke at me like that. And look at Batista now. Just, great success story there. Yeah, he doesn't need to return, to be honest. He also mentioned in an interview that he's loyal. He is loyal to the WWE. And upon speaking about this idea with teaming up with Ronda Rousey, again, Batista was all for it, and that the WWE was going to get back to him. And a few weeks would go by, he didn't hear anything. He would text Triple H asking, what's going on? Have you heard anything lately? I'm still for this idea. and never got back to him. They never replied in text or sent an email or called him back. They just ignored him, and they moved on. And they moved on, obviously, with Kurt Angle, which was probably the last idea. There were rumors about The Rock possibly being the tag team partner for Rousey. Obviously, that didn't happen. And if they did reach out to Dwayne Johnson, I'm just curious to know that side of the story. If it was ever pitched, and two, how far in the talks did they get? Just, maybe one day somebody can figure that out and share that story. Deadline.com released some information regarding Fighting With My Family, the movie based on Paige's life and career in pro wrestling. It's it's not a remake really, because the original documentary style from BBC, they filmed Paige and her brother. Oh my Lord, I'm sorry, I do not remember his name, but Paige is from a huge pro wrestling family. Her mother, her father runs a promotion out in the UK. They've held a lot of shows. They still do. They still do to this day. Even when Paige was out of the WWE for that year or so, that fall with Alberto Del Rio, she returned home and still had shows and took part. And somewhere along the lines, Dwayne The Rock Johnson got a hold of the documentary and was excited and became in I guess interested in making it into an actual movie. And of course, many of you will remember one time when Raw was at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the fans were told to remain after Raw went off the air because The Rock was there filming, or basically retelling the story and the match between Paige and AJ Lee the night after WrestleMania, where Paige won the first time the Divas Championship. And a bit off, I guess they were looking for, a bit by bit recreation, because, the ring setting, between the ring setting and the stage were all different, obviously. But again, we all know it's a different time, and AJ Lee was already on her way out at that point anyway. So, anywho, so The Rock gets into the ring, and before filming begins, because the cameramen are setting up all over the place, and it was at this point that he actually called CM Punk on the cell phone, and according to some reports, Vince McMahon got pissed off. It was off the air anyway. As far as I could tell, there weren't any WWE cameras still rolling them. They might have. They usually do that. Just for the sake of having extra footage of, aftermath, the shows and all that, and maybe use it for, a biopic later on. But again, according to Deadline.com, the release date was originally set for September 14th this year, but unfortunately it's been pushed back until March 1st of 2019. This is being done so that the feature, which was produced by The Rock's own production company, $7 Production, to avoid what would be a jam-packed weekend releases. In other words, they're trying to avoid and Avengers: Infinity War did the same thing. Matter of fact, a couple of The Rock's own movie Rampage did the same thing to avoid other competition. And some movies, I think, benefit from doing that. If you're opening up, say, another movie the same weekend and chances are they're going to beat you, just change your release date. Maybe by a month or so, a couple of months, but from September waiting to the next January, that's a big gap. Maybe it gives them more time to get back into the editing room, maybe shoot some extra footage, who knows. But giving them the benefit of the doubt, them being The Rock and their production company, to avoid competing with other releasing movies that weekend. So it's okay. At least we know now it's coming, one. And two, that we have a release date. Hopefully everyone's seen that. Well, first of all, the awkward opening from Paige herself to introduce the trailer, the teaser trailer for the movie. And it's pretty hilarious, where Paige met The Rock for the first time in backstage and asking for advice, and The Rock just goes off, being The Rock. And I'm quite curious to see this movie myself. I did see the original documentary, and it's quite moving. It's a hell of a journey. Paige was barely in the 20s when that happened, so you can imagine her now at 25. That unfortunately she has to walk away from the ring and watch everything from the sidelines. It's unfortunate. Hopefully, with the returning Daniel Bryan, and like she said in her farewell speech, that there could be some hope for her to return one day. Now, the WWE is set to return to Saudi Arabia this November, a matter of fact. And this comes out from many news reports out of Saudi Arabia themselves. Local news channels of the country picked this up, and a lot of news articles as well. The company just finished their trip with the Greatest Royal Rumble, obviously left from last week, and hit headlines in various locations, and for various reasons too, because it was very successful. Now it seems as if they could be heading back to the capital city of Riyadh. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing names and names of countries. You can tell I don't travel much. I just know these places exist. But the capital city in Saudi Arabia is hoping to have a follow-up to WWE's Greatest Royal Rumble. And it's also noteworthy that WWE is expected to pull out a similar event in Australia around the same time. So definitely going worldwide, as their namesake suggests, World Wrestling Entertainment. And, well, just getting back to this November event for Saudi Arabia, many are speculating that this would be a Greatest Survivor Series event. Possibly. Hopefully it's not that, because if they still have the original or the regular Survivor Series event in the States, what's the Greatest Survivor Series going to do different that they couldn't do here? Well, what was it last year? 5 against 5 main event. So for the Greatest Survivor Series, it will be 10 on 10, 10 individual wrestlers versus 10 other individual wrestlers crowding around the ring. That won't make sense. I would imagine they would have to really put the heads together and come up with something different. Maybe not involving 50 wrestlers again in a single event. Maybe they can borrow the Triple Cage from WCW, or hold another, maybe not call it World War III, but the concept of 3 rings, and go for 60 wrestlers this time. Just saying. I mean, they have all these concepts of WCW that they haven't really used. They only recently used War Games late last year, after how many years that they had WCW under their banner, and all their trademarks and all their match types that were copyrighted only for WCW. Now they own all that. And I'll get into a story here regarding some WCW trademark names. But good on them. I mean, obviously, the first Greatest Royal Rumble was a success. There was a deal apparently between Saudi Arabia and WWE to have a 10-year working relationship, costing about $25 million, supposedly. That has not come out yet. Many are thinking that something would say or add credibility to that story once the WWE and their stock report comes out later on in the year, to see how in all these investments came through. So I say go for it. And speaking of documentaries, Showtime will premiere on May 25th, Bipolar, Rock, and Rolla, based on Mauro Ranallo. And he put a bit of a statement when the trailer was premiered this week. Ranallo goes on to say, I have always tried to do my part to bring awareness to mental health issues. Over the last several years, I allowed my friend Harris to film me at my lowest points as well as my highest. The idea is to simply show others who suffer that they are not alone in that. Even when the outlook is bleak, you can overcome and achieve success. Mental illness is a life sentence. There is no cure, but it doesn't have to be a death sentence. Words of wisdom there by one Mauro Ranallo. Again, the trailer debuted this past week, and They didn't show any WWE clips. There were many highlights, however, from his previous engagements with pro wrestling as a sportscaster throughout different areas around the country. No mention about the fallout that he had with WWE the first time with the alleged JBL allegedly bullying him and had his breakdown and not going to work for over a month, and it was addressed several times on broadcast while JBL was still broadcasting. 1 week, actually, he could have had a legitimate excuse that he missed his flight because of a terrible snowstorm at the time, but JBL couldn't help himself and still poked fun at it that everyone else made it to work but him. And again, if the stories were true that he was bullied at that time, that was not helping at the moment there, Mr. Layfield. But he's no longer broadcasting. Thankfully, he was horrible as a broadcaster. Michael, yeah. 2 hours of that. No thanks. So once again, there's more Ronaldo, Bipolar, Rock and Roller, May 25th on Showtime. Speaking of other movie projects, $7 Productions, which is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's production company, is teaming up with Universal Pictures, and they have found their new star for the upcoming movie, Janssen Directive, a novel from Robert Ludlum. He's responsible for all the Jason Bourne series movies that have come out with Matt Damon and Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye. And according to The Rock, they have found their new star to be Janssen. And
his name is John Cena!
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But yes, John Cena and The Rock will finally work on a movie together. No word if The Rock himself will be part of the film, meaning in front of the cameras as another actor playing a character, or if it's just going to be a John Cena solo film. No word when the release date will be. They are in a pre-production stages at this point, so expect to see John Cena take time off again from WWE, and once that happens, you know why. And now the fallout of this will be my last gripe about the Greatest Royal Rumble, and it happened on Raw. And for those wondering, I don't really cover Raw, SmackDown that much because sometimes there are other news going on, and my studio time here is unfortunately limited to about 2 hours. And can I fit that much info? Sure, I can. I've done it for my first debuting episode of the JM Report, and it covered just about everything that took place during WrestleMania week and that weekend. And that clocked, that episode did, at 2 hours and maybe a couple of minutes, and it's possible. But I try to narrow it down to just get to the focal points of the week, and when necessary, like this one, to point out what took place on Raw that was a major story or something that stood out more than the others. And this one in particular is in relation to what happened at the conclusion of the steel cage match between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the Universal title. Now, I'm sure you've seen the footage by now, and I'm sure you even heard the commentary, which did not help at all. How do I know this, and how do many others know? Because while reviewing the replays, and they're speaking, they being the commentators, they realized, nothing we could say will support what we're trying to get across, because it's clear as day that they screwed up. Now, I have some more details based on that at my Greatest Report Royal Rumble review on episode 5, but I'll just briefly discuss that and then how they handled it the night after, or I should say the Raw after. So I believe when Reigns was going to spear Brock through the cage and only the bottom portion was still attached to the cage, I believe the entire piece, that entire section was supposed to come off. Otherwise, how can you justify Brock Lesnar hitting the floor first? Whether it was his back, his shoulders, his head, but his feet are still hanging over the mesh of the fence. There's no defending that. None at all. Of course, Roman Reigns rolling off Lesnar didn't help matters, but then again, it looked like he landed on his head, so maybe he wasn't thinking straight. Maybe he didn't realize, or, well, if this is a spot, I would assume Lesnar hit the floor already, so I should roll off his body now. So I don't blame Lesnar. I don't blame Roman. If it is to believe, then there's yet any proof of this to back it up, but it's just a belief of mine, and I know I'm not the only one, but that entire section of the cage did not break away entirely, and is what prevented Brock Lesnar to legit hit the floor first, because that was what the commentators were going for. They were trying to drill in that Lesnar's feet hit the floor. How can you say that? He's hanging at an angle, almost like a 45-degree angle his body was, and there's no way you can say that his feet hit first. So what did they do? This past Monday night on Raw, they showed a tweet, of all things, a tweet that went out earlier in the day. I didn't see it because I've only heard about it, and I knew it just would have made me more frustrated. But the referee of the match put out a tweet, and I don't care about his name right now, saying that he apologized for making a bad call. And that's just me paraphrasing. And then later on that night, Kurt Angle was interviewed backstage during Raw, that he was disappointed and that he has to stick with the decision because all referees' decisions are final. Remember that old line? So they were going to try to fix this, and that Roman Reigns is the uncrowned Universal Champion. Yes, they realized their botch. I mean, forget Titus O'Neil, forget the Jeff Hardy spot, and among other botches that night. They've clearly acknowledged that they screwed up, but without saying it. But the fact to go with the more logical and more reasonable choice here of whose feet hit the floor first, Roman Reigns. Like it, don't like it, doesn't matter. I mean, you got to go by their own rules that apparently they broke as they went along, and they just couldn't shut up about it until they realized, oh, wait, we can't justify this. We cannot. So Kurt Angle immediately stating that the referee screwed up, Roman Reigns' feet hit the floor first, and that he should be Universal Champion. But they moved on anyway because of this Sunday's Backlash Roman Reigns match with Samoa Joe, where Lesnar is not expected to show up, but at least some kind of, satellite link, quote unquote, have him show up on the Titantron, or, he won't say much, but Heyman to address the controversy, which is not, they screwed up. There's no controversy here. They screwed up. And Roman Reigns is owed a rematch. Again. This whole Roman Reigns project has been failing. I mean, he's great in the ring. He can be. This is a time long away from he would start off or end a promo with suffering succotash. Remember that? Supposedly Vince McMahon came up with that idea and fed it to Roman. Yeah, say this. Yeah. How could we take that man seriously, at least on television, and accept him to be any kind of champion moving forward? I thought when he was Intercontinental Champion last year, that little brief run he had with The Miz, I thought that was a step in the right direction to get him away from the world title scene for a little while and eventually build back up. Nope, they just cut it. They cut that short, give it back to The Miz, and now he's may or may not break Chris Jericho's record, because that's all the theme now in WWE, to break records. They did it at the Greatest Royal Rumble. They broke like 2 records in one night. Daniel Bryan going the longest, and Braun Strowman breaking Roman Reigns' previous record just a few years ago of the number of eliminations in one Royal Rumble. It's all about breaking records. And speaking of, if Lesnar makes it to July, I believe it is, if not sooner, he will break CM Punk's record of the longest reigning world champion in recent memory. Yeah, it's not the same championship. It's not even the same title. It's the Universal Championship, granted. But the fact that he's been a champion, whether it's world champion, international champion, the neighborhood's champion. He's the longest reigning champion of any kind right now, Brock Lesnar. So if the main set if the main state of mind here, if the main goal is just to break records just for the hell of it, then they're not concentrating and focusing on the greater and the bigger picture, and just to find ways to get Roman Reigns over. He was mixed reaction at best in Saudi Arabia. They were in Toronto this week. They booed the hell out of Roman Reigns. There is no cover up there. I mean, sure, they can pull a WCW and cue up the fans cheering for Goldberg when they were in Montreal or in Toronto that one time for Nitro, and they cranked up his theme music where they included Goldberg chants in his music, and that came across television horribly because it was so obvious. And why did they get coverage and shots of the fans' reactions beyond me? Because it wasn't matching to what the chants was saying over the speakers. It was just horrible. Anyway, bad call, an extremely botched move at the Greatest Royal Rumble during this Universal Championship match. I guess, for the sake of argument and in all fairness, this is their way of justifying and making things a little bit right by not calling it the obvious, but like, okay, it's been shown those back-to-back replays did not help matters, different angles and slow motions. It did not help. Neither one of those replays and different angles would ever say that Lesnar hit the floor first in any capacity. So kudos, I guess, to try to fix this wrong. And we'll see when and where Roman Reigns will get his rematch. Maybe SummerSlam, if not sooner, but we shall see. Dana Warrior is set to debut her new podcast, Total Warriors, that will premiere tonight, a matter of fact, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, over at the ultimatewarrior.com website. And she's been taking questions all week on her Twitter page at Dana Warrior WWE. I would assume this is something that she will do every week, where she will take questions and she'll read them on the air. I jumped right on it because I thought this was a great idea. I thought this would be something she would have done much sooner as a solo act, or maybe have a co-host. I'm not aware of, at least as far as the promotion goes. If you head over to a Twitter page, it's all there. But I know I jumped on it. There was one picture of the Ultimate Warrior that apparently it's been out for quite some time, but I only came to see it maybe about a year ago. And it was a picture of him backstage. He was in his locker room facing a mirror, and he was applying his face paint. This might have been for King of the Ring 96, his match against Jerry the King Lawler, because the attire matched. It was the same green attire that he had that night. Could be wrong. I mean, obviously he would have worn the same attires on more than one occasion. But I think he tried to avoid that personally. But this particular picture spoke volumes to me because it was, one, rare, and two, it wasn't often that we see the Warrior getting into character. If he wasn't always in character, this is basically him getting into character, applying the face paint. And I've always wondered if it was himself applying it or he had help with it, because he had a lot of unique designs in the later years, adding more layers, and there was one time he had a face paint with a black background, but he had multicolors throughout, as if it was splattered on his face, and I thought that was a nice touch up going with his ring attire. He was very good in color coordinating, and of course made for great action figures. I know I have a few of them myself. Anyway, my question was two questions to Dana Warrior. If there were any more pictures like that you would like to share with the rest of the world, I think that would be great. And the other one, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that reached out in questioning to explain what the Warrior Award really is, because it's conflicting with what the Warrior originally said during his Hall of Fame speech about 4 years ago now, to call it the Jimmy Miranda Award. And Jimmy Miranda was someone who used to work backstage for the World Wrestling Federation, and that everyone backstage, from the cable guys to the lighting guys, the pyros, the stage handlers, the guys who construct the ring that aren't wrestling talent, who aren't announcers or so forth, referees. Basically, the guys who drive and sleep in the trucks when they're traveling from state to state. To acknowledge them, even if it's a one-time or one-shot deal, a one-off, if you will, for the Hall of Fame, to acknowledge past, present, and even future hardworking men and women that basically put the show together, literally. And it's just the producers and the wrestlers that's got to perform on the stage that they built. And I say, yeah, that'll be a great idea, but the past few years have shown the recipients of the Warrior, the renamed Warrior Award, and not that what was the kid's name? Connor the Crusher. Not that he did not deserve any kind of accolades of any kind. A young boy battling cancer, and unfortunately lost that battle. It was very heartbreaking. And he was the first ever recipient of the Warrior Award. I thought it spoke volumes from the company, and it was very touching. They had a nice tribute video on the Monday Night Raw following his passing, and it brought me to tears. I got to be honest, it was very moving. I remember Connor was talking to AJ Lee and basically told her to stop acting crazy, and AJ just burst out laughing. It was such a great moment to see that. And since then, we've had quite a few recipients of the Warrior Award. Of course, everyone that's battled an unfortunate, unwinnable disease at times, whether it's cancer, whether it's tumor, paralysis, all points in between. And yeah, the idea is that these people, these men and women, they're warriors. They're putting up a fight. They're refusing to give up, to give in to whatever it is that's preventing them to do, certain things in life, whether it's just to walk, to run, to travel around the world, but they can't. They're spending their lives in a wheelchair, or they have to be near a doctor to have constant treatments, and traveling around the world may not be a good idea. And I've known a few people personally in my lives that they don't take vacations. They work, but they don't take that extra time off to, say, take a trip upstate or head out to the beaches or anything like that. I mean, it's close to home, but they just don't travel. They feel limited of their capabilities because of what's happening, whether, again, a sickness, a physical disability, or anything. But the point to this is that I asked Dana Warrior to clarify, to clear the airways of, I mean, is this really what the Warrior meant? Is this something that, this is not only one tweet. I'm just trying to explain my question to her, that, did WWE come up to her and try to change it, or obviously they did, change it enough where his name's still attached to it, but it's not exactly acknowledging the hardworking men and women behind the scenes, but rather to address the hardworking men and women who are living with unfortunate illnesses or disabilities that they either don't see a way to win, or they're still putting up a good fight and are in it for the long run. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I just felt that it should be cleared up. And who better than do so than Dana Warrior herself? So I'll definitely tune in tonight, 8 p.m., after I leave the studios, and give a listen. And if by some chance she does address the question and says, this question comes from good old JM, yeah, I'll pull that audio and I'll play it here, hopefully. And speaking of Jerry Lawler, over at his podcast, he did mention that the female talent who did not attend the Greatest Royal Rumble for reasons, they just weren't allowed because they're athletes, they're wrestlers, and they were not allowed to partake. So rather than just have them travel so far and not have them tour around the city or the country and, for lack of a better term, revealing outfits, whether it's just their, street clothes, if you will, that's not allowed in Saudi Arabia. So all female talents, wrestlers that is, stay home. But the king points out that they got paid regardless, as if they were part of the show. And I'm sorry, yeah, the king even made this a public statement on his podcast, and later on it was backed up by WWE that indeed this did happen. So kudos once again. This is my second or third kudos shout out to WWE for doing the right thing. They worked just as hard and as long as the shut up. I know what I said. They put in a lot of work. The women did of Raw and SmackDown's women's division, and NXT for that matter. That they deserved recognition like this. You know, they've been doing nothing but the first ever women's this and women's that, which is great. You know, Hell in a Cell, Elimination Chamber. They got their first Royal Rumble earlier in the year. Still waiting on the first ever women's main event at a WrestleMania, but we might. Well, let me rephrase. We may or may not get there next year, and the rumored match is Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey for one of the women's championships, depending where everyone lands. And right now, being at opposite brands, be curious to see which particular women's championship that they will main event with. Muhammad Hassan, remember him? Muhammad Hassan returned to the ring last Saturday night in Amsterdam, New York, for the Destiny Pro Wrestling show. And he went about 10 minutes versus Papa Don. And he laid him out with a flatliner 13 years after leaving the WWE. And he was last seen in a match with The Undertaker at the 2005 Great American Bash. And it was amazing to see Hassan. He actually came out, this video on YouTube over at Destiny Pro Wrestling's YouTube channel. You can check it out. He's in great shape. And he actually came out with this Muhammad Hassan persona, gimmick and all, the same music he played in WWE, or used, that is. And he looks great. He's in great shape. He slimmed down a little bit, not too noticeable, but again, he looks in great shape. You got to give it to him that he kept himself healthy enough. I guess he figured maybe one day someone would make a call, maybe not necessarily WWE, because for those who don't know or don't remember, there was a time where the Muhammad Hassan character was portrayed on television as a sympathizer for what was going on at the time, and still is to this day, but more specifically of, with terrorist groups around the world. Now, they've never acknowledged any particular names of terrorism, as far as any groups who were responsible for such actions around the world, but it was pretty clear on one particular episode of SmackDown when it was I believe it was the London bombing of the train station, and that they had a pre-recorded episode of SmackDown that happened to air the same day of the bombing, where Muhammad Hassan attacked The Undertaker and had about 4 guys dressed in all black and in ski masks. And matter of fact, this was on a July 4th episode, a pre-taped episode of SmackDown on 2005, as Theodore, at the time, General Manager Theodore Long, placed them in a match against The Undertaker. And that, I'm sorry, let me phrase that. The match was already set for The Undertaker versus Muhammad Hassan at the Great American Bash. But on this night, Hassan's manager, Daivari, was set up in the match with The Undertaker. Stand corrected. So after Daivari was defeated, obviously, Hassan began to pray on the ramp, and he summoned about 4 to 5 masked men dressed in all black, wearing ski mask hoods over their heads, and maybe cameo pants, like a desert cameo pants. But point being that they were covered up to look like best described as a cult following of Hassan. So what happens next is these guys had piano wire beating down The Undertaker and choking him out with it. Hassan would walk down the ramp and then place the camel clutch afterwards. And at the end of the beating, all the masked men picked up the Vari, raised them over their heads, and carried him away to the back. And this is where things went south because, again, this was a pre-taped episode of SmackDown. This is something that they used to do before SmackDown Live, and happened to air later on UPN when the London bombings took place. And yeah, I mean, something like this would not fly today, but it was just unfortunate, bad timing, and why go that route is beyond me. And I do not want to hear the argument about it's entertaining, it's mirroring what goes on around the world. Yeah, and movies do that too, but there's a huge difference where you see something like this in a movie based on true events versus what you see on television on a weekly basis, mind you, and it's mirroring what may or may not have happened during that time period. Or in this case, it was just bad timing to do such a thing. And Muhammad Hassan was already over as a heel. I don't think there was anything else that could have proven that. Just the fact that he was a foreigner and happened to be from his character anyway, that was from a part of the world that the United States was in conflict with. By the way, his real name is Mark Julian Capitani. He's an Italian American who played a character from Arabic descent in Muhammad Hassan. He's from Detroit, Michigan. And this man's pro wrestling career, at least in WWE, was literally destroyed and ended overnight after the Great American Bash because the uproar and the outbreak, the backlash from a lot of the fans, a lot of those that were hurt or affected by what happened during the London bombings, and for something like this to air on television the same day of, again, bad timing, was in poor taste. Now, could they gone ahead and edited this whole piece out? Yeah. I do not remember the exact details if the bombing I believe they had already occurred. There might have been a couple hours difference, if not more. And the episode still aired in its entirety, regardless. So maybe UPN did not get the heads up, or other network outlets that were showing this episode the day of were not aware. And I think some new measurements were in play that from now on, any pre-taped episodes of anything needs to have a rundown sheet that needs to be passed along with the video in tow to all these networks to know what's involved in the video and the movie or whatever it is. So that way they can know how and when to edit it before it airs, or maybe even during it airs. They could have done, and I think some outlets did this after the fact on the West Coast, that they blocked out the entire segment. You can still hear the commentators, the crowd reactions, but there was just this big black box or an oval shaped on screen, just blocking out everything that was taking place while the beating was taken down, and even when the robbery was carried out. It was just bad timing. But that was then 2005. Now in 2018, 13 years later, Muhammad Hassan was able to return, and once again, he was in great shape. And I don't know if anyone got wind of this return, anyone in WWE. It'd be difficult to bring the man back because he was essentially killed off on television during the bash, and bring him back maybe as a reformed character, different name maybe. It's really difficult because we've seen it before. With this Bray Wyatt. Before then, he was Husky Harris, and it will take time to get used to the new formation of him. It took time. Then the Wyatt family came along. Time does heal all wounds. I think 13 years is more than long enough to maybe not ask for forgiveness, but return, say your piece, and that you're not like that anymore. Character-wise, that he's not like that anymore, and that he just wants to do better and positive things in his career moving forward. But that's just me. That's just an idea. because times have changed that what they can and cannot get away with anymore. And hopefully this was a lesson learned. I don't think they've done anything like this or as bad like this other than horrible dialogues, horrible promos, horrible broadcasters. But that's just me. These guys don't ask me for my opinion, so I just give it here. And I'm grateful for the ones that listen, and thank you very much for tuning in. Martin Stone and it was Danny Burch. Danny Burch? Let's go with Burch. Danny Burch has signed a new NXT deal last week, as a matter of fact, and was last seen during the original United Kingdom tournament that NXT held, and is expected to re-debut real soon. So good news on that part. Danny Burch is making his return to NXT. Speaking of other good news, according to the live results of the Knox County's website, Kane won the GOP primary votes and within an extreme thin margin of 0.04%, which adds up to a 17 vote difference from his other opponents. And as of this past Thursday, yesterday, matter of fact, Kane, or Glenn Jacobs, as he's running as, wins the Republican nominee for mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. All hail Mayor Kane. I was confused with Kane and Kang. I thought Kang was Kane in The Simpsons with his sister Kodos, and I was about to do some kind of meme where they're laughing in the background and how the humans made a mistake of voting a hell demon as mayor. But I realized, wait a minute, his name is Kang, but Glenn Jacobs' character is Kane. So, yeah, I almost botched there myself. When I realized my mistake, I shut down that project. So, congratulations are in order for one Glenn Jacobs, who appears to be the new mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. And that'll be very interesting to see moving forward how they're going to explain why Kane is no longer on WWE television. It's obvious. Even they acknowledged it all over social media, WWE that is. So us as fans will realize, us as the smart ones, as they call us, will be aware as to why he's no longer on television, at least up until maybe this first term is up. And would he run again, maybe as governor? Who knows? And, follow the footsteps of one Jesse Ventura. But we'll see. Speaking of returns, Jason Jordan is expected to return as soon as this coming week, as reported by PW Insider. As many of you remember, Jason Jordan has been out of action due to a neck surgery back in February. Good timing, I guess. I know that sounds really bad because that father-son storyline with Kurt Angle was just horrible. Granted, they were already turning Jordan heel and really screwing things up with the remaining members of the Shield at the time, because Ambrose was already out by a torn bicep. So the writing on the wall was there for the Shield, and it just was not working out. And slowly but surely, things fell apart even further when Jason Jordan was injured and required neck surgery. But he seems to be doing much better at the physical therapy. I'm not sure exactly what kind of surgery he had other than neck surgery, but I'm saying there are different types. I'm not sure if it was fusion surgery or just a realigning of some tendencies, because this seems like a real fast recovery. I mean, I know surgeries take less time to recover, but you still got to be careful, and it's very, very almost like walking on glass whenever anyone returns from a neck surgery, and they can still put in their time. But look at someone like Paige. It just took a simple kick to the back between her shoulders, and it was enough to whiplash her neck backward and re-injure herself. This happened to Paige. It's on YouTube, accidentally by Sasha Banks. So let's not get on Sasha's case about it. This happened to John Cena. This happened to Batista, of course. Probably the most famous one is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah, he was dropped on his head, but he kept going for almost a full year, realizing okay, I never really fully recovered from that injury being dropped on my head as a result of a power driver from Owen Hart at SummerSlam 97, and required neck fusion surgery, and he was out for almost a year came back, changed his style, wasn't as technical as it used to be, going hold for say someone like a Bret Hart, became more of a brawler, and lasted for a few more years, only to call it quits after WrestleMania 19. So I don't want to jinx anyone. I don't want to put this up there where it's going to happen, but history has shown the lifespan of anyone's pro wrestling career gets shorter when someone goes through such a neck surgery. Now, again, I'm not sure exactly what kind of neck surgery Jason Jordan went through, but either way, I would be very careful with him, because if he's made to be some kind of prospect or some kind of prodigy, then I would protect him best way as possible. So now, WWE has sent out a press release based on the company's first quarter earnings. Quite interesting. I'll just read off just a few notes here because it's a lot, and I guess I'll stick to the more important ones. Revenues have reached as much as $187.7 million, which was on par with the first quarter of 2017. So good news there, with a slight 5% increase in comparison. Operating income was up to $21.8 million. That's based on a $29 million comparable basis as compared to their $4 million in the prior year's quarter. The WWE Network average paid subscribers has increased to 5% to a 1.56 million paid customers. Okay, so there's more legit details based on that, because they say they broke a couple of weeks ago 2 million subscribers, but here they're saying it's 1.56 million. So yeah. Anyway, digital video views have increased 56% to 6.7 billion, and hours consumed increased to 69% to 243 million across digital and social media platforms. Very good. In relation to WrestleMania, the company broke the record for merchandise. Well, actually, they did break merchandising sales for WrestleMania, but more specifically, broke the record for the Mercedes-Benz Superdome's highest grossing entertainment event at $14.1 million, attracting over 78,000 fans. WrestleMania also hit a record of 2.12 million global households on the network alone, making it the most watched WrestleMania of all time. The network subscribers were viewed was about 25.2 million hours during WrestleMania week, and 14 hours per subscriber during the week of WrestleMania. This compares to the 25.5 million hours last year, and a 12% year-over increase. Again, very good. WrestleMania season is just that. They put a lot of heart, soul, and effort into WrestleMania weekend. Hell, WrestleMania week. So much that goes on, especially Fan Fest and other smaller shows like NXT that take place during the Fan Fest, and other smaller promotions like Shine or WWN, WXNW, and among others. They, Ring of Honor, they, take advantage of that. And it's quite a wrestling week for the city that WrestleMania is being held in. Final note here about the quarterly income. During WrestleMania week, about 13.9 million hours were consumed on digital and social media platforms. That's up about 27% from the previous year. And April 9th was WWE's most viewed day ever on YouTube, with more than 50 million views. So someone's doing their homework right here, because, yeah, social media, the internet, that's where a lot of the revenue is coming from. And it supports it. It really backs up the WrestleMania event itself. And kudos. That's what, my fourth one of the day for WWE. They're doing really well, despite what we see on TV or sometimes even hear on TV. But the numbers speak for themselves. And this is available online, as a matter of fact, because, as you know, WWE is a publicly traded company. And these facts are available for anyone that wants to follow up and read up more on the other details that I did not mention here. So as I bring this show to a close, just want to add a couple of more stories here. Former U.S. rugby team captain Todd Cleaver had an interview on CNN, and he revealed there that he's in talks with WWE for a possible tryout match or a tryout performance at their center in Orlando. Todd will go on to say that he first got invited to a tryout while he was still playing before receiving another invitation after his retirement from rugby. So I'm not too familiar with Todd Cleaver here. Rugby is a tough sport. It's very similar to our football, American football, if you will. And it does take one really tough athlete to not only suggest or think of starting a career with WWE, but to be honest, to succeed and survive physically long term. I mentioned a few injuries here on this show alone. So hopefully, again, I'm not too familiar with the biostatus of Mr. Todd Cleaver here, but hopefully it works out. We could use new faces, new talent, if you will, in WWE, whether it's in NXT or the main roster. But I hope it works out for him, and I'll definitely keep an eye on that story and report it back here on the JM Report. Finally, the Big Show. He's hopped on social media lately, and he seems to be, once again, in great shape. He's maintaining his routine that when he broke the internet a few months ago of how much he slimmed down and the time he took off after his cage match with Braun Strowman on Monday Night Raw, where ironically the same spot and the same side of the cage broke off when Strowman body slammed Big Show through the cage and he fell over. And again, the bottom portion was still attached to the cage. But what's funny there, Big Show was power slammed and his feet ended hitting first while still on the mesh of the cage. Probably somebody should have rewind that match and take note, because they repeated many similar spots before, and this one being the cage breaking away and having Big Show, had that been a title match and Big Show was the challenger, he would have become the new champion there by escaping the cage and his feet landing first on the floor before he got injured legit because he had to take time off, and Strowman would have lost his championship. So yeah, maybe my issue, well, not issue, but my theory of the bottom portion of that side of the cage breaking away maybe would not have happened, or maybe it wasn't meant to, as I'm thinking back now, that spot with Big Show and Braun Strowman. But it makes sense. I mean, they screwed up. They just screwed up. Let's just face it. They screwed up. There's no excuse. There's no way of fixing it. They screwed up. Anyway, back to Big Show. He says he's healing stronger than ever, as he posted on his Instagram. And he held up a piece of equipment at the gym that he was working out in. And it's one of those little handles that you attach to the bigger machines where it's on both ends, on both sides, where you have to reach up or reach down and pull the weights towards you. He broke it off. He broke off a handle from the machine. He didn't specify if it was too much weight or that he yanked too hard or whatever the case was, but he had a big smile on his face, posing for a selfie while holding up that piece of equipment or the handle, and you can clearly see the cable snapping off, and it's just hanging there, the poor thing. He also made mention, along with healing stronger than ever, as well as breaking equipment. So he's the Big Show. He's a giant, and sometimes, assumingly, sometimes they just don't know their own strength, even if they're in shape, out of shape. Some just tend to get broken, and unfortunately for the gym equipment, it was a handle. So that would just about do it for the JM Report this week. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I don't think you need me to tell you what you can do to help support the show and my channel here. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, the whole 9 yards. You can also send me an email at IAmGoodOlJM@gmail.com if you have any questions or anything particular you would like to know to cover story-wise, to review something from the past pay-per-views, or hell, even movies. I'll take movie requests. I do that sometimes here as well on my YouTube channel. And just let me know which ones you want to hear about. I'm definitely. I know I promised this last week, but I just been so busy myself. I got a project coming up tomorrow, matter of fact, in Mileona, Florida. The Wasa Moments Training Center having a live event, WXW, and they invited me over. I reached out to them earlier in the week, and they were very kind enough to, they being Alpha Owani, one of the original Wasa Moments, and his lovely wife, Lynn, and family invited me to head out to their live event. And I'm practically going to be there all day, from the time they start setting up the ring and the stages, during the show itself, and even after the show when everything's broken down. So, yeah, hopefully there could be some kind of a project out of this, and that I'll be able to share soon enough. But let me not get ahead of myself too much here, as it's a very exciting thing. If it all works out, hopefully there are future projects or works between myself and WXW, but we'll see, one thing at a time. And I'll definitely keep you all posted. If not here, head over to my Facebook page at facebook.com/GoodOlJM. I'm also on Twitter. Matter of fact, all the details will be on the subscription. Excuse me, on the comments below. No, not the comments. Oh my God, there I go again. On the description below, you'll find all my information on how and where to reach me. I'm always available, so just don't abuse it. Call me at 3-4 in the morning, just asking me questions. When was that day that this guy won the championship? How many times did he defend this? So and so. Like, yeah, don't do that. But I'm very grateful for everyone listening, for tuning in and spending some time here on the JM Report. More to come. That's for sure. More to come. How, when, and where. I'll keep you posted. Got some more exciting things still to come, and I got to put in the time and effort. So if there's ever a time if there's ever a time where there is no JM Report, then you'll understand why. But I'll still do my best to post something to keep everyone informed. So with that said, just want to give a shout out to the CSB studios out in Tampa, Florida, the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, for allowing me to use their studios once again. Great school, great way to learn anything in media, video, audio, TV broadcasting, you name it. You can just head out to the CBS school, nearest one to your location. Matter of fact, let me see if I can get their information to see if you can schedule a tour of the place. They do tours of the campuses, and see if you can fit one into your schedule, and come out to a touring of the campus. Either the director or the campus coordinator can set something up for you during the week, or even on weekends if you think you're not available to come because maybe you're working or you're in school. And you know what? I'm having difficulties finding their website. This is ridiculous here, but you know what? I'll definitely have that information here for a second. Okay, I was able to find the information. Just took me a second there. Head over to gocsb.com. Once again, gocsb.com, where you can locate your nearest school campus of the Connecticut School of Broadcasting to begin your career in media. They're very nice people. They're very open. They'll work with you on anything and everything, on projects, on audio, as I'm doing here, even on video. They have a lot of good equipment to use that you can reserve and take it out on your own to pursue your own projects on the side. They're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and even at LinkedIn. So head over there, gocsb.com. And with that said,